Would you like to introduce yourself any more than calling yourself Eric Leo?
Yeah, I run my own channel. It's basically Jiminy Cricket, which is it's basically just an alias. It's because basically people are supposed to have a conscience. That's what, Jiminy Cricket was in Pinocchio. Basically, it's like a deep metaphor. Uh, and then basically I have a channel dedicated to my own political persecution, which is by this gang stalking program and what I think is a machine. And that's basically systematized stalking. I do have a degree in sociology from Eastern Michigan University, but graduated with honors degree in sociology, minor in psychology. If it wasn't for this program, I probably would have a PhD by now. But I guess that's all I want to say, unless you have anything that you want to talk about.
That's excellent. Um, so my first proper question is, could you maybe give like a brief definition of gang stalking for a person who has like never heard of it?
I always like when people do questions like this because it gives me an idea of like what people need to know. But it's basically organized stalking by either a system or individuals in a group to basically terrorize the individual into manipulating their behavior for usually the purposes of civil silencing the intelligent, or basically civil dissent.
Yeah, that's pretty concise.
Is yeah, it's the most accurate I can put at the moment. Yeah, I should probably define that.
So, if somebody is sort of the victim of gang stalking, what would be the kind of first event that they would notice?
So, yeah, usually it's the inundation of distraction. So you all of a sudden see yourself being extremely distracted, either through telecommunications or this is what people complain of, the V2K, voice to skull technology, where you hear voices in your head. I didn't really experience that when I first started it. It was through, I was trying to get into the music industry, and then it was Lady Gaga. I started following her more closely, and it was basically all online. I kept on seeing technological malfunctions with my computer. There was a lot of weird stuff that happened, and most of these people in gang stalking don't talk about semantic priming, which is the coagulation of words and images to basically give you an idea. Um, and then there's a trigger. Usually, it's put in there with the trigger. So once it's triggered, it'll be pulled out of you with that trigger. So you think it's your original conception, and then you act on it. But really, it was actually put into this idea was put into your head. So what was the original question? Oh, so that's how you would know. It's basically the inundation of ideas either through this semantic priming or literally directed energy weapons that put ideas into your head. So if you find yourself doing something that's out of character, unordinary, or something that you wouldn't normally do, that's usually how it happens, and it's usually antagonism from the outside. That's really hard to grasp. In conjunction with you having these thoughts that you wouldn't normally have.
I see. I see. So this semantic priming is somewhat similar to what, say, British magician mentalist Darren Brown appears to be able to do.
Yes, yes, yes. It is. I actually use him in the machine strategic operations, tactical capabilities, and silent noise sequences as the original post. What Darren does is, and he's done this before. If you see him sit down with the gentleman that does he actually sits down with a gentleman and tells him that he has a gift for him, and that the gentleman will guess what the gift is. Uh,
Oh, it's the bicycle one of Simon Pegg.
exactly, exactly.
Yes, I've seen that episode. Yeah.
So, but what he basically does is he just uses words. He just speaks in a certain tone, not tone, but in a certain rhetoric that puts the idea into his head that he wants a red bike. And so he says, "I want a red bike," and that's what's in the box. but he didn't originally want a red bike. All he was doing is like, it's like Speak of the Devil type of work, where he actually just puts the idea in your head that you want a red bike, and it's a supplanted thought. You see the one with the teddy bear and the kids in the classroom.
Yes.
So that's how you would do it with words. So he does a very good job of showing, that's basically semantic priming, about how he does it with words, and so words spoken and then words written.
So in some sense, it's sort of setting up a certain degree of expectation in the victim, which affects the way that they perceive the world around them, is what you're saying.
Yes, very good. So it's usually bits of information, and I'm a very junior psychologist, but my suspicion is that's how the mind works: is you bring up these little instances until it basically bubbles up into your forefront of consciousness. You know, he could have primed him ahead of time, as you can see with the marketers one that he also did, but basically he just gives these subliminal instances of ideas till he basically triggers them to think, oh, I want a red bike, or, you know, a teddy bear, in these different subliminal contexts.
Okay, that sort of brings me on to my next question, which was I listened to you talk in one of your videos about something called the sensitization phase. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's something to do with presenting you with something that would otherwise be innocuous, but because of what you're doing, it develops a certain meaning specifically for the target, but not for anyone else who would view it.
Yes, it's my direct suspicion, through a lot of speculation, not only from personal anecdotal experience, but from experience about looking at all these TIs, that there's definitely an outside protagonist or misdirection. So it's made to look as though it's somebody else, when it's really this conscious, organized entity, most likely the government, intelligence agencies, military, or this machine. Further research pending, but it's supposed to be made to look as though it's like your neighbors, or, you know, or the government, but it's like that's a very ethereal concept, so you don't know who it is, and that's supposed to make you look crazy, but it's definitely directed to make. So it's made to look as though it's a conscious protagonist. While what was the original question?
It's something about creating a sort of a coded language that is directed at the victim.
That's what that is. So it's my direct suspicion as well that it primes the target. So whoever the target is, it will create these outside instance or sequence of events for the target. So to an outside individual, objective third party, it will look as though this person's crazy, but for the individual that's being stalked, it feels very real, because they're getting primed to be able to see it, when otherwise it would just look like a normal, mundane instance, and that's done to basically make it look as though it's schizophrenia or some other mental illness.
The perceptions or the perspective of the victim is largely the target of the how do I describe it? The activities of gang stalking.
Yeah. So it's no, none of these TIs really talk about it, but I really think their internal mental monologue of what they believe is happening to them is constrained, or basically given to them in this mind control semantic V2K way, where they're actually told that this is stalking, but it's really not. It's just an issue of perception. But it feels, as somebody that went through it, it feels very real. It feels it feels and seems very real. And try and convince, like, you wouldn't have been able to convince me. It just took a long time of me dealing with the street theater that I talk about in the new blog post, to realize that these people that are just basically ordinary people are being puppeted.
Okay, could you explain what street theater means?
Okay, so street theater is what I didn't come up with that name. It's what Cheryl Welsh, who's a researcher at, I think, Georgetown University. She's a I think she's a lawyer. She's into one of the judicial jurisprudence respects, and it's basically when you think that people in your normal, everyday environmental surrounding are stalking you. So a lot of these instances, and I've it's supposed to make it look as though, and this is what got me in trouble when I first started dealing with this, although I didn't think people knew, it becomes like really hard to it's almost as it's supposed to make it look as though like the people in your social environment, especially family and friends, know that it's about it. It's what's also talked about in that the gang stalking initiation, where it's supposed to look as though all these people are conspiring against you, when in fact they're just being manipulated. So how is this being accomplished? It's either that like all of these, you know, all of these people that are in your social environment, like because Cheryl Welsh explains it as she gets 100 times a day she'll get people that spit at her, make negative remarks, blow smoke in her face. Um, so basically, some like negative, detrimental outside um, confrontation is created in regular um, society, just walking down the street, for instance. So it's either that all these people are hired to like do this, or conspiring somehow by like some smear campaign in order to get people to silently do this. Like it's not like it would be one thing if they were overt. So this happens. This is a universal instance that happens over many TIs. So many targeted individuals complain of this type of thing, where it's like people in cars that like turn in front of you. Again, it's like an internal mental instance. I give a couple examples. Bonnie, the YouTuber Bonnie, is one good example. There's a doctor. There's another lawyer on Dr. Phil that gets this done to him. And basically, what it is, it's street theaters. A whole bunch of people in your perception are doing negative things to you while you're basically walking down the street or in your everyday social environment and interaction. So this is talked about in the micro environmental manipulation section of the new blog post called the Machine Organized Gang Stalking Program.
I imagine that this kind of victimization or this kind of activity would really lead the victim to feel like everyone in the world is against them.
And that's kind of the mental condition that it wants to create. It's what I argue is called learned helplessness, because eventually they'll use torture, whether that's from the antagonism from directed energy weapons, or using the manipulation of this street theater, which I argue is done so well that it has to be systematized through like a machine, because it could be a group of intelligentsia behind a computer, but the reaction time is so fast, and it would have to be done in parallel with a whole bunch of TIs. Like there's tens to hundreds of thousands of people dealing with this. That's pretty clear and obvious that there's a whole lot of people dealing with this.
How important is the isolation of the victim in the gang stalking program?
Okay, so the isolation is very important, because that way nobody else can see what it is that's happening to you. Like 60% become estranged from their family and friends. Most of them are women. Usually, men don't handle this type of thing very well. They're much less emotional, more logic driven. They get very aggressive, like I have. But the isolation of individuals is important. That way, nobody else can see what they're seeing, and they don't have an objective outside third party to identify what they're saying, especially because since they make these people look mentally ill, because there's no objective outside third party, they have no frame of reference. So if you just are yourself looking mentally ill and you can't explain this because it's intentionally supposed to be make it look unexplainable and make you look crazy, then you have no verifiable way of objectively identifying what you're saying as to be as true. So the isolation is a very important factor in that.